That was a time when one song could stop the world. A voice that inspired millions, filled stadiums, and defined an entire generation of R&B. That voice belonged to R. Kelly. From the global success of I Believe I Can Fly to becoming one of the most influential artists of the 90s and early 2000s, his rise to fame seemed unstoppable. But behind the music, a very different story was unfolding. A story filled with controversy, questions, and consequences that would eventually change everything. So what really happened? How did one of the biggest voices in music history go from global admiration to one of the most debated legacies in modern music? This is the story of fame, music, and everything that came after. In the 1990s, R&B music was going through a transformation. The sound was becoming smoother, more emotional, and more personal. Artists were beginning to tell deeper stories through their music, blending gospel roots with modern production. And in the middle of this transformation, one voice began to rise above the rest. That voice belonged to R. Kelly. Before the world knew him as one of the most controversial figures in music history, he was known for something else entirely: his ability to create songs that connected deeply with people. Songs that felt personal, songs that felt real. R. Kelly's journey began in Chicago, where he grew up surrounded by music, but also hardship. His early life was far from easy, and music became an escape, a way to express himself and find direction. Like many great artists, he started by performing in the streets, subway stations, and small local shows. It was during these early years that he began to develop the sound that would later define his career. A blend of gospel emotion and R&B smoothness. His first major breakthrough came in the early 1990s, but it was one song that truly changed everything. That song was I Believe I Can Fly. Released as part of the soundtrack for the film Space Jam, the song quickly became a global anthem. It was different from the typical R&B songs of the time. Instead of focusing on romance or nightlife, it delivered a message of hope, belief, and overcoming obstacles. The moment the song began, with its soft piano and uplifting tone, listeners were drawn in, and as the chorus hit, it became something unforgettable. I Believe I Can Fly. It was more than just a lyric, it was a feeling. The song's success was massive. It played on radio stations around the world. It was performed at major events. It became a source of inspiration for millions of people. And just like that, R. Kelly was no longer just another R&B artist. He had become a global star. But to truly understand how powerful R. Kelly's influence was at his peak, you have to go beyond just one song. Because I Believe I Can Fly may have introduced him to a global audience, but it was only one piece of a much larger legacy. Throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, R. Kelly was not just making music. He was shaping the sound of an entire era. His ability to write and produce gave him a unique position in the industry. He wasn't just performing songs, he was creating them from the ground up. Melodies, lyrics, arrangements, everything passed through him, and that level of control allowed him to build a sound that felt consistent, recognizable, and deeply emotional. At the same time, the music industry itself was evolving. Channels like MTV were playing a major role in turning artists into global stars. Music videos were no longer just promotional tools, they were experiences. And R. Kelly understood this. His videos often carried strong storytelling elements, blending music with narrative in a way that kept viewers engaged. This helped him stay visible, relevant, and constantly in conversation. But perhaps one of the most defining moments of his career came with a project that pushed boundaries in a way few artists had attempted before. A project that blurred the line between music and storytelling. That project was Trapped in the Closet. This wasn't just a song, it was a series, a long, unfolding musical narrative filled with twists, drama, and suspense. Each chapter left listeners wanting more. It became a cultural phenomenon, sparking conversations, reactions, and debates across audiences. Some people were fascinated by its creativity, others were confused by its structure. But one thing was clear: people were paying attention. By this point, R. Kelly had achieved something very few artists managed to reach. He had become a household name. His music was everywhere, his influence was undeniable, and for a time, it seemed like nothing could slow him down. But beneath the surface, the tension was growing. The earlier allegations that had once been pushed aside were not disappearing. They were lingering, quietly building, and as time passed, they began to resurface with greater intensity. What makes this part of the story difficult is not just the presence of controversy, but the way it coexisted with success. Even as concerns were raised, the music continued, the hits continued, the performances continued, and for many fans, there was a separation between what they heard and what they were hearing about. However, the world was changing. The way people consumed information was changing, and the way the public responded to serious allegations was also changing. By the late 2010s, conversations about accountability, responsibility, and justice were becoming louder and more widespread. The past could no longer be ignored. As more attention was brought to the allegations, public perception shifted dramatically. This was no longer a background issue. It was now at the center of the conversation. Media coverage increased, public discussions intensified, and the industry itself began to respond. For an artist whose career had been built on widespread exposure, this shift had a direct impact. Airplay decreased, public support declined, opportunities disappeared, and gradually, the image that had once been associated with musical brilliance became overshadowed by controversy. This is where the story takes on a deeper meaning, because it forces a reflection on the relationship between art and accountability. On one hand, there is the undeniable impact of the music, songs that inspired, songs that connected, songs that became part of people's lives. On the other hand, there are the serious issues that changed how that music is viewed, and this creates a tension that is difficult to resolve. For some listeners, the music remains powerful, separate from the artist. For others, the connection is inseparable. And that difference in perspective continues to shape how R. Kelly's legacy is discussed today. As time goes on, one thing becomes clear. Fame can elevate an artist to incredible heights, but it does not protect them from consequences. Looking back, the story of R. Kelly is not just a story about success or failure. It is a story about contrast. The contrast between talent and controversy, between influence and accountability, between what was created and what was revealed. And perhaps that is why this story continues to be talked about, because it is not simple, it is not one-sided, it is complex. But I Believe I Can Fly was only part of the story. R. Kelly's influence in the 1990s and early 2000s extended far beyond a single song. He wrote, produced, and performed numerous hits, songs that dominated charts, songs that shaped the sound of R&B. He worked with some of the biggest names in the industry and helped define what modern R&B would sound like. At his peak, it seemed like everything he touched turned into success. His music videos were played constantly on channels like MTV, and his songs became staples at events, parties, and personal moments. He was not just an artist, he was a powerhouse. But as his fame continued to grow, so did something else: controversy. In the background of his success, there were allegations and accusations that began to surface over time. At first, these issues did not seem to affect his career in a major way. His music continued to perform well, fans continued to support him, and for a long time, the focus remained on his artistry, rather than the growing concerns surrounding his personal life. As the years went on, however, the situation began to change. More attention was drawn to the allegations, more discussions began to take place in the media, and gradually, the conversation around R. Kelly started to shift. It was no longer just about the music, it was about the man behind it. This shift became even more significant in the late 2010s. A new generation of listeners, combined with the rise of social media and public accountability, brought renewed attention to the allegations. Conversations that had once been overlooked or ignored were now being taken seriously. Public opinion began to change. And with that change came consequences. Radio stations began to reduce or remove his music. Streaming platforms faced pressure from listeners. Collaborators distanced themselves. And slowly, the legacy that had once been built on musical success began to unravel. What makes this story so complex is the contrast. On one side, there is the music, songs like I Believe I Can Fly, which inspired millions and became part of people's lives. On the other side, there are the serious allegations that changed how people viewed the artist himself. This contrast creates a difficult question. Can the art be separated from the artist? For some, the answer is yes. For others, it is no, and that debate continues even today. As time passes, R. Kelly's story remains one of the most complicated in modern music history. It is a story of talent, a story of success, but also a story of controversy and consequence. Because in the end, music can make someone famous, but actions can shape how that fame is remembered. And that is what makes this story so powerful. It is not just about a song. It is not just about a career. It is about the rise to greatness and the weight of everything that comes after. In the end, I Believe I Can Fly still exists as a powerful piece of music, a song that once inspired millions. But the story behind the artist who performed it has changed how many people hear it today. If you found this story insightful and you want to explore more deep stories behind legendary songs and artists, make sure you subscribe to this channel. Because here, we don't just listen to music, we uncover the stories behind it. And trust me, the next story will change the way you hear your favorite songs forever.